All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Interim Housing Case Studies panel. My name is Claudine Sipili. I am a human that journeyed through and survived a period of homelessness in my life. I get to serve as a team member at Destination Home, and I am your moderator for tonight. Before we get started, I'll turn it over to Hillary for some housekeeping details. Hillary?
Thank you, Claudine. Tonight's event is going to be conducted in a webinar format on Zoom, and you probably would like to see our slides. So if you have questions this evening, you can please pose them in the Q&A section, which you can access through the bottom of the screen. Please try not to use the chat section for the Q&A because we may not pay as much attention there as we will to answering questions in the Q&A section. Closed captions are available today under the live transcript tab at the bottom of your screen. You were automatically placed on mute when you entered the meeting. If you feel a burning need to ask a question live, please use the raised hand function and we'll answer your questions. We'll allow live questions, time permitting, by calling on you and asking you to unmute, at which point you can ask your question. If you have joined over the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And if during the meeting you have technology challenges, you can use the chat feature to communicate with Hillary Baroga or Jeff Scott, or you can send an email to Hillary Baroga, that's HILARY.BARROGA @hhs.sccgov.org for assistance. And Claudine, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Hillary. Well, tonight's event focuses on interim housing, featuring the City of San Jose's emergency interim housing sites and bridge housing communities, and our county's Willow Glen studios on Pedro Street and Casitas de Esperanza. We will talk about interim housing models being developed or being deployed in our community, what we're learning at specific developments, and how these sites fit into the broader strategy for ending homelessness. Before I introduce our amazing panelists, let's talk about what interim housing is. Fundamentally, interim housing is temporary housing for unhoused people. There are different ways of implementing interim housing. Some interim housing is dedicated to people who are connected to supportive housing programs. These people are those that have qualified for a rental subsidy and supportive services, but are either waiting for a unit that is currently under construction to be completed, or are looking for a rental where they can use their subsidy. Other interim housing targets people who are not yet connected to the supportive housing programs, but who are looking for a service-enriched program while they seek permanent housing and work towards increasing their stability. Programs also differ by the types of facilities used or built. Tonight, you'll see a program operating in a rehabbed former nursing home, a building using modular construction, and tiny homes designed to be quickly constructed for emergency response. The unifying components of interim housing are that, number one, the housing is temporary, and number two, they are enriched with services focused on people transitioning from homelessness to housing stability. There's a lot more to learn tonight, so let's meet our panelists. Our first panelist is Brittany Kirkland. She is the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at Abode Services. Brittany?
Good evening, everyone. So excited to be here. As Claudine mentioned, my name is Brittany Kirkland, Senior Director of Health and Wellness for Abode Services. We are a nonprofit organization that fights homelessness and the root causes of homelessness. One thing that I get to do as I serve Abode is to oversee the service side at Willow Glen on Pedro Street, which we'll speak about this evening. I'm so passionate about this work, especially interim housing, because I really believe that everyone in our community and beyond deserves and needs a safe dwelling. And I've witnessed how this model of interim housing has changed and even saved lives.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. Our second panelist is Reagan Henninger. She's the Deputy Director of the City of San Jose Housing Department. Reagan?
Thanks, Claudine. I'm Reagan. I'm with the city of San Jose, and one of the things that I oversee for the city's housing department is all of our homeless response programs and services. And one component of that is interim housing. And over the last 2 or 3 years, the city has really done a lot of work in interim housing, and it's really been a great opportunity to innovate and try new things. So I'm super excited to talk about what we've been working on.
Thank you, Reagan. And our third and final panelist is Consuelo Hernandez. She is the director of the Santa Clara County Office of Supportive Housing. Consuelo?
Thank you, Claudine, and good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Consuelo Hernandez. I'm the director of the Office of Supportive Housing. The charge of our office is to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. Through that work, we are responsible for interim housing that we're going to talk about tonight, all the way from to permanent housing. And part of the work that makes me really proud is being able to engage with our neighbors to build community in the developments that we are coordinating with, either as a county or in partnership with our service provider like Brittany or the city of San Jose. And I look forward to talking to you about how we build community outside and within a property.
Awesome. Thank you, Consuelo. So as I stated earlier, one of the key components of interim housing is services focused on people. Like the rest of our supportive housing system, interim housing service providers aim to center the needs of the people it serves in the work they do day to day. Let's start with the people and how they are being served at one of our interim housing sites. Brittany, we're turning to you. Can you tell us about Willow Glen Studios on Pedro Street, maybe the services that are provided and how the people are being served there?
Absolutely, Claudine. And if you don't mind, I'd love to share a video with you first. What you'll be able to see in this video is a alumni of Pedro Street, Willow Glen Pedro Street. I'll use that term, they're interchangeable, so excuse me. Fred is wonderful. You'll get to see him tonight, and you'll get to hear from some of the services that actually take place from the service team there at Pedro Street. So Hillary, if you could roll the video for us.
I knew what it was like to be, homeless.
Abode Services is the largest homeless housing and service provider in the Bay Area. As part of our growth in response to the region's housing and homelessness crisis, we now operate nearly 60 programs that aim to rehouse people in need as quickly as possible. Abode Services' mission is to end homelessness by assisting low-income, unhoused people, including those with special needs, to secure stable, supportive housing, and to be advocates for the removal of the causes of homelessness. Interim housing programs at Pedro Street assist homeless men and women enrolled in supportive housing programs who are still in the process of finding an apartment to rent or waiting for new supportive housing. Featured in this video, we will provide insight into just how Willow Glen Studios provides services to support residents to improve their health and quality of life.
In addition to reducing unsheltered homelessness and helping individuals meet their basic needs, Willow Glen Studios service team members help residents more easily access medical and social services that would improve their health, housing stability, and quality of life as they move into permanent housing.
Pedro Street was a good transition to enable me to move into my new home here at Calabasas.
Many participants in the interim housing program participate in the Santa Clara County's rehousing program. This means they have government subsidies such as housing vouchers to help them afford permanent housing. Willow Glen Studio has 73 single-room occupancy apartments and one-bedroom apartments with private bathrooms, as well as common kitchen, dining hall, recreation room, meeting room, and laundry facilities. The apartments are staffed 24/7 with more than 20 staff providing on-site security, property management, as well as medical, social, and support services that help residents improve their health and quality of life. While living in interim housing program, participants have individual rooms which are similar to very small apartments. Amenities such as the kitchen, pantry, and laundry facilities are shared by all residents. It is typical for program participants to live in interim housing for a few months before moving into permanent housing.
Like I say, it was a stepping stone for me to go from being homeless into being permanently housed. I knew that I would have to stop somewhere, and Pedro Street was my stop. Yeah.
It is estimated that 46 million Americans visit food sharing programs annually. It is also estimated that 1 out of every 6 Americans go hungry on a daily basis. When one considers the subcategory of homeless individuals and other at-risk populations, hunger is too prevalent to quantify. Inadequate nourishment directly results in numerous physical, mental, and emotional health consequences.
The food was good. They got a kitchen that makes the food for Pedro Street. And it was good quality food too. Plus they brought in some frozen foods too, so you could have a good assortment, good choice. I was living in my car before Pedro Street, and that was tough on my back. Yeah, it got cold out there too sometimes, because I was, exposed to all 4 seasons. It was a long process. But thankfully, it ended by being homeless out there. That was the important thing. Yeah, the staff over at Pedro Street were extremely friendly. I can't recall their names because I'm horrible with names. But yeah, the women and the men that worked there were very, very nice with people. It made it really, really worthwhile. Being in a nice, warm environment where you get fed, and the staff there were real nice, very welcoming.
Thank you, Hillary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brittany. Wow, that's amazing. I loved it when Fred said, well, the food was good. All right, so I have just a couple questions for you, Brittany. How has Abode Services worked towards factoring in the perspectives or the feedback of residents, or maybe even people that are most impacted by homelessness into the program design considerations at Pedro Street?
Wow, what a really great and important question, Claudine. I think first we should maybe discuss about, who would we consider the most impacted? And for me, I absolutely would consider those with lived experience that are currently or formerly experiencing homelessness. What Abode does, which I'm really proud of, is we create opportunities to listen, and to learn in a number of ways. It's incredibly important for us to really understand that these individuals are the expert in their own lives. They get to tell us what it is that they need. And we are the service provider and get to, understand and create resources to provide for those needs that they get to identify. So of course, we have the foundational design offerings that are insurance that you heard about today, sustainable nutrition programs, case management, other wellness things, but that's really the minimum. We like to discover deeply what people's hopes, wishes, desires, dreams are for the future. And how we do that on a micro scale is we actually do individualized service plans These plans are where our residents over at Willow Glen can sit down with a member of the team that you saw today in the video and talk about their goals, talk about their wishes, talk about what it is that they want to do. And those conversations begin to build patterns that we then drive our design change for our program. We get to discover what these things are and change based off what we're hearing is the need. What's also really great about Willow Glen is we actually have like a built-in continuum of care for our residents. So that provides us with a looped feedback approach. So I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. Most of the persons slated for Willow Glen interimly actually are on their way to some sort of permanent supportive housing site or apartment complex. They're just waiting for that place to be ready. And what's great is part of that is that they go to somewhere that's actually served by a boat or another key provider in Santa Clara County. And part of their greeting at their permanent home is, how was it? How was it at Pedro Street? And that feedback gets looped back to the program and the program manager there. And we continuously change our design and our model based off the feedback that we receive. On a macro level, so larger scale, Abode launches a yearly participation survey. This survey gives us insight into how residents feel about their services they receive and allows an avenue to give us suggestions and feedback. So Claudine, listening and learning, feedback makes us better. And we try to create as many systems and opportunities to listen to our lived experience, community alumni, members of, and hear the needs from the people who know most about it, which is those who are serving.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I love it. Every time I hear person-centered, approaches or people-centered, it's just amazing. So my other question for you, Brittany, is what are some of the things that are being done at Pedro Street that are helping new residents become integrated into their new homes and the greater community in that area?
So a couple things on this one. This is really exciting. So it's kind of a twofold question for me. I am sure most of us on this call have moved before. We've moved into some sort of new house or apartment, and you bring all your belongings with you. Well, can you imagine getting to your home, even if it's interimly, and you don't have very many belongings, those things that make a house a home, like shower curtains, towels, all of those types of things. We provide those. We call it a move-in package. And we really encourage folks to create a home out of where they're staying there at Pedro Street, so they can bring their authentic self, learn what it is that they like, how they want to design their room, and we provide those things for them. The other piece to this answer, that what we get to do at Willow Glen is really foster a warm environment that is safe for our residents to just discover who they are and who they want to be friends with, and all of those types of great things that we get to do. We put together events that create a natural environment for folks to get to know one another. We always invite the community whenever we can to these events, so there's opportunity to make connections with their neighbors inside the building and outside the building. For instance, something we're working on right now is a community art event where artists from the community are going to be coming into Pedro Street and bring in all of their art supplies and materials. And these artists are going to be sharing their experience and talent with the Pedro Street residents so that they can participate in building their own art. And we're hoping to install that around the community as well, and for folks to share their story.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. All right. Well, when a system centers the people they serve, it's almost always a win-win. And when the people benefit fully from the programs and services offered, the whole system benefits, right? So Reagan, we're turning over your way. The Community Plan to End Homelessness has 3 primary strategies: addressing the systemic causes of homelessness, improving the supportive housing system, and then addressing the quality of life for our unhoused neighbors in our community. Reagan, can you tell us, how does interim housing fit into these strategies?
Thanks, Claudine. There's so many ways and on so many different levels I think interim housing can contribute to a better housing system. But before I get into that, I wanted to show everyone a video about Sandy, who is living in our Monterey Bernal Emergency Interim Housing Site. So Hillary, if you could cue up that video. Perfect.
I've been homeless for 6 years, and I've been advocating for myself for apartments. Those 6 years, I've had a lot of bad experience at shelters. I've been paying motels back and forth. Little bit of earnings I had, gone, until they called me and she told me she was gonna move me to the little houses, tiny houses. And when I came here, I was so amazed, not only of the place, but the people here. The people here are fantastic, from the guards all the way to the staff and the caseworkers. They accepted my dog here. She has all the papers and everything. I feel like I'm home. Okay, I feel like I'm home. And I want to thank you, the governor, the mayor, the city, the county, for doing a project like this for us. Because this has been the greatest thing that had ever happened to me in all those years. I appreciate that the governor and the mayor had the heart to know what homeless go through, and this was made up for us. And I really appreciate it with all my heart, because I feel safe here. My heart goes out for you guys, because you guys are doing a great job, a fantastic job. That we were being treated like people, okay? Not a statistic, but like real people. And I have to thank everyone here.
Thanks, Hillary.
Sorry, I was a little mesmerized. Go ahead, Reagan.
I know. That video is like a year old now, and it gets me every time. So, by the way, Sandy's dog's name is Bubbles. I feel like we should have put that in the video somewhere. I love Bubbles. So, as you mentioned, Claudine, those three pillars of our community plan, addressing the root causes of homelessness, expanding our housing system, and really improving the quality of life for people who are unsheltered. But there are two other fundamental pieces to the community plan that I think interim housing can play a part in, and that is incorporating the experience and the expertise of people who have experience of being homelessness, and also I think focusing on racial equity. I think throughout all of our strategies in the community plan, those are two themes that we really take to heart and try and integrate through all of those strategies. But interim housing, as I said, I think plays a role in all of them. As Brittany and others have mentioned, interim housing can often be a place for people who have a subsidy. It can be a temporary place for them to be. Or for people who have a rapid rehousing subsidy, it's often a place for them to stay while they're searching for their apartment. Yeah. And interim housing can also be a place for an entire encampment community to come in and to live in community together and still remain that support system for each other. They may not have a specific subsidy or, an end housing destination right now, but with support and services on site, we can help them with that. And so I just really want to call that out, because for San Jose, that has been a very specific strategy for us. So in the last 3 years, we've built 4 interim housing communities, and there's one more that's currently under construction. So that's totaling over 470 beds. So I'm going to quickly walk you through sort of the 3 models of interim housing that San Jose has implemented. So Hillary, if you could pull up the slides, I just thought I'd show some visuals so it's not all Reagan talking. So first in San Jose, we have what we call bridge housing communities, or BHCs. And they are the traditional tiny homes that people mention that are smaller sleeping cabins. And then there's on-site, there's communal or shared kitchens, shared shower and laundry, and then there's on-site meeting and community space. And the operator here at both of these sites is Home First. At our BHCs, we also have what we call a community advisory committee, and those are groups that have space for people who live in these communities, but also space for people who live nearby, residents or businesses. And really the purpose is to create that connection, to kind of have some integration, and also just a regular line for communication, and ways for, I think, people to make those connections. So Mayberry has been open the longest, and that's a site that's located on Valley Transportation Authority property. And since we have been operating Mayberry, we have served 212 people. 177 have left the program. 72% of that have gone to permanent housing or other temporary destinations. So it's a pretty high number of people that are leaving to a permanent housing destination. It's way higher than a typical emergency congregate shelter. At Felipe, which opened a year ago, this is the site where we used it specifically to house an encampment that was just like half a block from the site. And while we were under construction, we worked with Home First and spent a lot of time in that encampment, and we were able to move over half of the encampment to Felipe. And so I think that's, again, a really important strategy to highlight as how interim housing can really play a role in that third strategy. Next slide, Hillary. So this second category we call emergency interim housing. Probably not our most creative name, but it was born out of our emergency COVID response. And as you can see here, it's a very different construction type. This is what we call modular build, or it's purchased prefabricated units. And basically we plop them down on a site, and I'm oversimplifying tremendously. There's a lot of infrastructure we do to that site to bring in power and sewer and water. But I will say that our first site, that we completed, was Monterey Bernal. That's where Sandy lives. And that site, we started construction in May 2020, and we were complete with people already living on site by November 2020. So very quick. I will say we did take advantage of some COVID-related emergency declarations that were in place, but it really, the silver lining of COVID, if there is one, is that it really did allow us to treat at homelessness and respond to homelessness like the real humanitarian crisis that it is. So it really allowed us to move quickly. So in this model, every unit has their own private bathroom with shower, and then a separate bedroom area. And then they have a shared kitchen, shared laundry. There's on-site dog runs. There's on-site community gardens or raised beds, which is very, very popular. During the pandemic, these EIHs were functioning as what we call emergency non-congregate shelter, meaning people have their own private room. It's not a mass shelter in a big warehouse. And we were housing people older adults who had certain medical conditions, making them vulnerable if they were to contract COVID-19. And our site operators are Home First. And then we do have a site that is specifically for families, and that is operated by Path and Abode. And recently we've been using these EIHs to house individuals from encampments who are referred by our street outreach teams. And then again, we do use them also as temporary housing for people that have a voucher or a housing subsidy. And then because our sites are taking referrals from a multitude of sources, right? We take someone who's referred from a rapid rehousing program, or we take someone who's referred from an encampment. Because we're taking referrals from kind of all over the place, we are staffed in a way with services and support that we are able to serve a wide range of people with varying abilities and disabilities. And I just highlight that because it's so important to serving the people and serving them in a way that their needs are met, and everyone's needs are unique. But it doesn't come without a price tag. I will say that. So at Monterey Bernal, which is the first site that we opened, we've served 177 people. 101 of them have left, and 70% of them have moved on to stable housing. And then one of the last things I'll mention is that we are working with San Francisco Foundation and Home Base, which is a local consultant with expertise in housing and homelessness, to really look at what we built so quickly over the last 3 years, to really look at what we built, how are we using it, and how are we sustaining them long term, but also what improvements can we make. We are tasking them with working with the Lived Experience Advisory Board and getting experience and feedback from the people who have been living at these sites to really find out what has been working and what could be improved or what are some of the gaps. So that will really, I think, inform us as we keep building interim housing in San Jose. And then our fifth site that is under construction has investments from Destination Home and All Home and the Housing Trust. And those investments have allowed us to have a partnership with the Lived Experience Advisory Board to incorporate their expertise and their feedback along the way from really inception to operation. So they provided feedback on the design, and they'll provide feedback on the operations plan. So really we have at this site, because it's we're sort of out of COVID and we have a bit more time, it's really allowed us to really center and incorporate the experience of people who have experienced homelessness. And then all of these sites have community advisory committees, again, that hold space for people who live in these communities, but also neighbors and nearby businesses. And then next slide, Hillary, the third category of interim housing that San Jose has is our Project Home Key site. We have received 2 awards from the state to purchase hotels. One site is already in operation and has been in operation for over a year now, and it is functioning as interim housing. And in the long term, we will develop the site into permanent affordable housing. And then we just got a second award from the state to purchase another hotel, and it will function largely the same way, interim housing for a period in the beginning, and then longer term housing, permanent housing in the long run. And our service providers here at our first Home Key site is Abode. So each of these interim housing sites really do play, I think, a role in so many different ways in our entire supportive housing system. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I've done a lot of talking. Hillary, you can take my slides down.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Reagan. It looks like we have some questions in the Q&A. So I want to move into maybe a couple of those questions. So question from Phoenix says, regarding 72% you stated moved from interim housing to other housing, what percentage found permanent or long-term housing in Santa Clara County?
Don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it is almost that entire 70%.
Thank you. And then I'll do one more. What percentage transferred to other temporary shelters? And you can call a lifeline on, you can call Consuelo as your lifeline if you need to.
I'm not sure Consuelo would have this data in front of her either, but you know, I might be able to pull it up and I can put it in the chat.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for all of that. I obviously I have a bias towards factoring in the voices of lived experience into design processes, and and also especially selecting an operator for a site. So thank you for touching on that. And just one question, Reagan, that if you can answer it very briefly. One of the questions that we often hear is, people asking, oh, well, what is this program being put up here in this spot? So can you just quickly talk about how the city of San Jose selects sites for interim housing?
That's definitely the hardest part, is finding a site. And I feel like no matter what the housing is, interim or permanent, it's always siting. But our interim housing is located throughout the city. Our first priority is city-owned sites because we control it, we can go fast, we don't have to buy it, we don't have to lease it. So that's been our first priority over the last 2 or 3 years. But the trouble is we don't own a lot of sites that are developable. We own a lot of kind of funky, tiny sites and easements and sites that just aren't big enough for what we're building. But we also go to other public agencies. So we'll go to Caltrans or Valley Transportation Authority with the hope that they would be willing to lease to us for no cost or low cost. And that has been the case for some of our interim housing. Mayberry is located on the VTA site, and we also have interim housing that's located on a Caltrans site. And then the last thing I would say is that we do factor in, when we're looking at a site, proximity to amenities like transportation and shops and parks, because unhoused people want the same amenities. Like, we all want to be close to those kind of amenities. So we do factor that in when we're looking for sites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Reagan. So as we have heard from both Brittany and Reagan, homelessness, it can't be solved by one organization or entity, right? It requires a commitment from our entire community. So Consuelo, we're turning over to you now. Community engagement is a key component of any development, right? And so we want to ask you, Consuelo, what are some effective ways that community members can be engaged in interim housing?
Thank you, Claudine, for the question. And just on a personal note, the space of community engagement and being transparent and sharing information with the community is actually one of the reasons why I fell in love with government. I've been working in local government for 20 years and have made it my core mission in all of the work that I do to be very open with the public about what we do. Core to that really is building a relationship with the community, because if you have that trust and you have information and you're very open about what their role is in the process, in the program, I think that that makes for a really good partnership with the community. And we've seen a lot of challenges during the pandemic because we weren't able to meet with community in person, right? A lot of our engagement has been via Zoom, like we are here tonight. And so it's required us to be very creative about how to be dynamic and how to be engaging through Zoom. And I just want to touch on a little bit of the linkages between what Brittany talked about and what Reagan mentioned. When citing interim housing and engaging the community, one of the things that we have found to be very helpful, not just in planning interim housing, but also in sustaining it in the long term, is building that relationship with the immediate neighbors. Reagan mentioned the community advisory committees. And, you know, part of this building that relationship with the community, over time, you really see the outcomes increasing in terms of engagement. The feedback that we get from the community is on an ongoing basis, because the questions that they have, at times, you know, as neighbors, we just want to know what's going on. And if you don't know where to go, then I think that can be scary at times. So maybe I can share with you, the county has and runs an interim housing site out of the Civic Center, located next to our main county facility. It's Casitas de Esperanza. It was similar to what Reagan talked about in leveraging the speed, if you will, during COVID. We started construction for Casitas de Esperanza maybe about 4 or 5 months after the pandemic. It's 25 units specifically dedicated to families. And before the pandemic, we did a bunch of engagement and really talked to the community about the need for interim housing and the type of interim housing. And through those conversations, we promised an interim housing site for families. And that's what we delivered. And I think that's really helped us. So we are going to show, I'd like to share with you a video of one of our very active members of the CAC around Casitas de Esperanza. And sorry, that means Little Houses of Hope. It's run by Amigos de Guadalupe. And we asked this specific member who's been with us through the entire process, because part of this is also learning. What can we do better? What did we do right? What did we get wrong? How do we change and modify what we do? Because at the end of the day, at our core, we want to be transparent. We want to bring the community along. And if we don't ask for that feedback loop, then and don't change, then we can't get better. So Hillary, can you please tee up? We're going to hear from Antonina now.
It is important for me and the neighbors to have an input when any public or private entity builds something that may change the characteristics of our surrounding neighborhood. So it was important that the county, with its knowing that it would be in an area and a neighborhood, that they reached out to us. The county did well by providing a forum early in the project for all of us to engage in. And this forum helped all to understand the challenges of the new community, and it helped to mitigate any issues with the existing one. and learned how all can support a positive, successful outcome. And I asked the county to recognize and support requests from the existing community when we asked for slight improvements near the site. This is where I felt they could improve, the county can improve. These were improvements that the new and existing communities could benefit from, and I was disappointed with what was barely achieved at the La Casita site. My view of temporary housing has not really changed since participating in the community, in the CAC. I've been active learning about housing and homelessness, and I know there's no silver bullet. La Casitas was serving a small vulnerable group that do not get the attention it needed, in my opinion, and that's where I wanted to help out and participate. My wish is that the community members living near interim housing have the opportunity to become involved as stakeholders and not naysayers when interim housing is placed in their communities. And my humble opinion is that the housing agencies must do a standout job of outreach prior to the start of the interim housing. This may reduce unfounded fears and set expectations for all parties. Neighbors do want to be supportive. I hear it from my neighbors. They just have this, and I'll repeat because this is the last question you gave me, and I think it's an important aspect for someone from the community, is that of course they have these fears. And I've heard the fears, I've listed them, and I've investigated them, and it's just unfounded. And you cannot keep the people in the condition that the unhoused people in the condition they're in without someone stepping up. So when it comes to the community, I think it's the authorities that are going to be putting these interim housing in place that need to continue to communicate with the community and letting them know, hearing their fears, talking to them to let them know what you plan, what the county plans, what the interim housing plans to do in order to make everything successful. We have supportive housing, and it's not the one being built also, it's the other one down on 2nd Street. We have also on 1st Street, that's another interim housing. The city's called out to me to ask about that. Like you said, the Lot E, and then of course the La Casitas. Now I believe the La Casitas is a really shining example of how interim housing can work out in a neighborhood. The one over at Lot E is supposed to be for those who are over at Guadalupe River Park. And I'm hoping that the surrounding neighborhood gets back their park. Instead of it only being for homeless, it will be also for us that live here too. There is a lot, and we are all trying to work together to do it, but some of us are stressed at the situation, and I have to recognize those that are stressed at situations that are around us. They are still fearful about all these things going on. Our neighborhoods will constantly change. I know that. I just want it to change for the better, right? Especially with the variety that's here. I love to see this variety come, but I want to see it lift all boats. I want to see all of us do better, including interim housing, including supportive housing. So I want to see it all do better. It is important.
Thank you, Hillary, for that. I just wanted to take a few minutes to share a little bit more about why it's been so important, the role that Antonina and others, both here at Casitas and at Willow Glen Studios that Brittany talked about earlier, and the kind of beautiful question that we get that I think sometimes we don't really know how to answer is, what can I do? What more can I do? What are there supplies that folks need? Can I help host an event? I mean, I think it's been really beautiful to see the community who wanted more information. And once we were able to build that relationship, and now we've been leveraging it in other conversations because Lot E is in close proximity to this property, we thought it would be great to leverage that and not necessarily have a secondary community advisory committee, but just leverage those relationships that are already there in the neighborhood and really start to, increase our reach of the community within that. And, during the holidays, Antonina and a few of her neighbors reached out to us and said, what are you all doing for the holidays, for the families? Can we provide books? What is needed? And I think they've come a really long way in wanting to be at the table to help us solve problems and be a good neighbor. And I think that's really key in how we make our sites successful, and assuage those concerns of other neighborhoods where we might be coming that they don't know what interim housing is, or, we heard a lot of fear over the last year because of the speed at which we're moving. Neighbors feeling like they're not engaged enough or not informed. And Antonina is an example of somebody who we really appreciate because she's given us so much feedback, and we've used all of that in our, every time we go out to a community meeting, we think about those, the feedback that she's given us, but also like helping us answer those questions. And I know Brittany, in the work that we did at Willow Glen Studios, it's the same thing that, we're using that approach. And now at Willow Glen Studios, we have events that we host there that are open to the community. So it really does feel like it isn't just a project that is happening in your community, but really that you have the opportunity to be a neighbor. And if you think about your own experience with your neighbors and you check up on each other and say hello, and I think that's been a really great lesson that we can walk away with at Casitas. We still hold our quarterly or bi-monthly meetings with them, with the community, and now they reach out and they want to go and talk to other people in the community and say, yes, you should welcome projects like Casitas to your neighborhood. Thank you, Claudine.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for that, Consuelo. And I have another question for you, and this comes from something that I've heard. I've heard people say, that we need to get unhoused people into interim housing so we can teach them how to be in community. And I really believe that people that are unhoused are in community, right? They have a very strong sense of community. And so my question to you, if you could answer it briefly, please, is how can interim housing help our unhoused neighbors integrate into the broader community? Why, right? And why is that important?
Thank you, Claudine. I think the sense of community is just as important inside any one of our developments. And I really have appreciated the work that Amigos de Guadalupe has done to create that community, because, if you think about an unhoused person, an unhoused family, and the trauma that they face in the uncertainty of being homeless. Yeah. There's also, as Reagan mentioned, a sense of community that they build in a space that they consider their home right now. Yeah. Right. Whether it's a specific encampment, whether it's a street. And when we ask people to move into a new place, that yes, it's a better situation. It's a roof over your head. It's on an interim basis. And that can be scary because if you don't know where you're going to go after, and the possessions that you have, as little as they might be, that all of that is part of you. And one of the things that we've heard from those with lived experience is, you're taking me from what I know and what I feel comfortable, putting me in interim housing, and then I have to move again. Yeah. And now I'm very much removed from what is comfort. And so that's been a key thing that we work with our service providers, and they each take a very different approach. And when we think about families and babies and children, if you imagine somebody from school, right? And if they're living in South San Jose and we're moving them to downtown, their school changes. And so we take all of that into consideration. And I'd like to share with you a video from our Amigos de Guadalupe. Hillary, if you can tee up the video for us, please? I think Amigos has done a really good job, and I just want to share with you that their approach.
My name is Laura Delgado. I am the program director for the Unhoused programs with Amigos de Guadalupe. As Casitas Esperanza, our tiny homes of hope, is one of our unhoused programs at Amigos. And we've noticed that with a lot of our families, they come in and they just come in not connected with anybody or anything. And they even sometimes find it challenging to be able to begin to open up and talk about things that they're going through, and just connecting with not only their case managers, but even the rest of the families that are staying at Casitas. One of the things that we practice in Amigos de Guadalupe is radical hospitality. So we right away try to connect with our families. The case managers really try to just build that relationship with our families and the children that are part of the household. And we have also created a lot of opportunities for the families to connect with one another through after school programs, through different activities for the children to do. We also have a lot of seasonal events that create the opportunity for families to come together and sit down together and just get to know one another. We have our meals program where folks are able to sit down together in the dining area and just sit down and have a meal together. And that's how we kind of break the ice, and we're there to support them. We're there to, lock arms with them and just help them through this journey and let them know that, they are part of the greater community and they have a lot to offer. They're just going through some challenges. It's really important because for so long, like I said, families have been disconnected. They've gone through a lot of different things. And when they come into one of our programs, they begin to build those relationships and they begin to feel seen. They begin to feel heard. They begin to feel like, I am somebody. Sadly to say, a lot of times when families are going through these different challenges of being unhoused, they don't feel like they're even heard. They don't feel understood a lot of times. And when they come to Casitas, it's really important for our families to know that they're valued. They're valuable. They have a lot to offer. And it's really important for us to let them know that, there's a community here that believes in them and will help them get through these challenges. I can tell you many stories of many families that have come through, that have shared with me and have told me, Laura, I have built stronger relationships here than I have in my lifetime because I didn't have stability. When folks start to get together as a community and break bread, have meals together, they begin to share about their stories, they begin to share resources, they begin to uplift one another. I remember specifically one family who was able to get housed, and she got her permanent housing, so it started to get other families excited, like, if that can happen for you, it can happen for me too. It's possible. So it's really encouraging for families. And like I said, they share resources with one another and let one another know, you can go here to get this, you can go here to get that, and come out of this. Families have told us time and time again that before coming to Casitas, they had no hope, they had no stability. But when they came to us, their hope started to build up. Week after week of being with us and getting to know their case managers, getting to know other families, getting to hear other stories, their hope started to come alive again. Because sometimes what happens is, families go through so much trauma that they lose hope. They lose hope in the system. They lose hope in themselves. They lose hope in just society. And when we bring them in, we really try to rekindle that hope that it's still there, and they can count on, our staff, they can count on each other to help each other through.
Thank you, Hillary. The work that we've done both inside the community and outside the community is to take the feedback and kind of integrated. So at Casitas, it's a pallet shelter. So if you imagine basically a white box with a little bit of a pitched roof, and Amigos came in and they wanted to create a colorful space for our families. And I'll share a few pictures with you, Hillary, when you're ready. We can put that up. So you'll see here that even the community members have taken it upon themselves to make recommendations about these panels. So Antonina talked about, the feedback that she gave us was, you're not doing enough. It doesn't aesthetically look nice. And this should be a nice place for people to come home to. And so Amigos did a really good job of adding these panels to the fence. And when you drive down the street, you can see it does really feel like a little neighborhood and a little community. And the kids, they've added these swings. And if you look at the colors and you visit the site, there's just a lot of light and a lot of hope. That's really important. And through that same exercise and conversations with the CAC and Amigos, they created La Esquinita, which means the corner, because one of the comments that we got from the community inside Casitas was, when we have our families that want to visit or visit with us, they can't come inside because they're not a participant. So we created a space right next to this that the county also owns, where families can visit, they can sit, they can hang out, and it also created the visual appearance and address the concerns that the community had, because there was thought that maybe people were going to be hanging out at the corner, or how do you create that community space? And the community can also come in, right? So if you're a neighbor, you can also come in and have your lunch there. And I think it's really taking the feedback from the people that are our neighbors, and the feedback that we get from people that are staying in interim housing, combining that together to really bring them, an integration into, now they are neighbors. Now they are neighbors, and if they want to hang out and have lunch or have a chat, they can, because the space is open for them both. Thank you, Claudine. Thank you, Hillary.
You're welcome. Wow, that's amazing, Consuelo. I love the colors. And there's a picture there on the bottom right quadrant where it looks like an arrow going up, right? It's like it's a movement. People are progressing in life, and the hope is for them to end up in permanent housing. So I love that. And the colors is like a bright and vivid, and symbolizes like a new beginning and definitely hope. So thank you so much for that. All right, we have someone in the audience that has a question.
Marilyn Rose.
Yes.
If you still have a question, you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I didn't realize I had set up a question. I just say I appreciate everything that everybody's doing. It's very interesting. And I do remember working back in the day in Gilroy, had an interesting, there was Bamboo Village. It was a whole homeless community that talk about people organizing. They even had a bulletin board for task assignment. And the police used to come out and chat with them and find out services. So it's good to see what's going on now. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I wanted to see if anyone else from the audience has any questions for any of our panelists. No? All right. Well, Hillary, do you have anything else that you want to add? I do have a last question for our panelists, a surprise question.
I look forward to hearing the surprise question.
It's not too much of a surprise. So I want to bring everyone back into, I guess, in this space, and really just ask the three of you, This has been an amazing, a very colorful conversation in more ways than one. And I want to ask each of you, starting with you, Brittany.
Actually, Claudine, why don't you, we do have one more question in the
okay.
Q&A.
Oh, I see it. All right, so we'll go to that question. We'll put, Brittany, stay right where you are. Don't go anywhere. So a question from Deborah says, I read that the city received additional funding of $54 million. How will that be spent? So Reagan, you want to take a stab at that? You're on mute, Reagan.
Thank you. And myself double muted. So I think what that figure is referring to is the city has committed some general fund money to operating and building more interim housing. The mayor and council have given us a goal to get to 1,000 beds of interim housing. We're hovering around 500 right now. So we're evaluating sites and future possibilities for more interim housing.
All right, thank you, Reagan. So there's no red little bubble for another Q&A question. So now, Brittany, thank you for not going anywhere. So something that you would like the audience to take away from your speech tonight, or from your presentation.
Ooh, okay. Interim housing can really jumpstart the healing. It can jumpstart wellness, and it really adds to the community as a whole. And I'd love to see more of it, and I hope you all are supporters.
Oh, absolutely, thank you, Brittany. Reagan?
I think interim housing can be an opportunity to innovate, to try new things, to create community amongst the people who are living there too.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. And then Consuelo.
Thank you, Claudine, for the surprise question. I think more broadly, when we think about interim housing, it is the strategy that we have in place, and is when you connect people to interim housing that have a permanent pathway towards housing, right? Whether it's through a rental subsidy, or folks who have been assigned a unit that's under construction, and being able to provide that space for folks, between it's 3 months, 6 months. I think that's really where we want to see interim housing go, because it basically has a pipeline of folks that we're building units on the county side. Over the last 5 years, we've funded about 2,000 units of permanent supportive housing through our housing bond. And we've created these opportunities where we have a lease-up process for folks. And the biggest challenge is finding people sometimes. And so interim housing does provide that opportunity for us to work with people immediately, bring them indoors, and also like the lessons learned over the last 4 or 5 years of, creating this bridge when a person has a pathway, right? And we need it all, and we're moving on all fronts. And so I would just say to the public who's listening is, there are strategies in place. Reagan mentioned there's 3 different things that we're working towards. Within each of those, there are countless sub-strategies, and we're happy to talk about them and bring in the lived experience voice, and really address the root causes of homelessness through race and equity. So I'd say that this is one key component of the work that we're doing, and the strategy behind it that really will link people to permanent housing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Consuelo. All right. Well, if you would like to learn more or find out how you can become involved or contribute to the work that city and county and service providers are undertaking for interim housing, we have contact information featured on this slide. We will also be sending out the slides to all the participants that signed up for the panel, so you can access the information later. And now I would like to introduce David Myers. After all, we are celebrating Affordable Housing Month, and David Meyer here from SV at Home has a few words to say before we close out the night. Go ahead, David.
Oh, thanks so much, Claudine. Yes, I'm David Meyer. I work for Silicon Valley at Home. We're an affordable housing advocacy organization, works all across the county, and we are proud to be sponsoring Affordable Housing Month this month throughout the month of May. Thank you all the panelists tonight. This has been a great event. I really learned a lot. I feel like this is one of the areas that I know the least about, and so it's been great. It's just been a really great overview for me to learn about all the great interim housing options that are being created to help some of our neighbors who are in the most need. So really, really awesome work, guys. Thank you so much. So just real quick, it is the end of May already. I know we're going to Memorial Day weekend, so Affordable Housing Month is actually almost over. But throughout the whole month of May, there have been over 50 events that have taken place about all kinds of different issues related to housing and affordable housing, everything from what we can do to help our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness, to connections between housing and environmental issues, to how we can just get more homes built and how we can be more equitable in development. So there's been a kind of the whole range of topics, and the idea of Affordable Housing Month is it's supposed to be a time when people across the county can through all these different events, learn more about housing and affordable housing topics, but also find ways that they could get involved and engaged. And so I know there was tonight there were some ideas about and opportunities for people to get more engaged on this issue, which is excellent. So I'm going to put in the chat, for those of you who are still around, a link to our website. There are not many more events left because it's almost the end of May. However, we do have recordings of already uploaded of, I think, over half of the events that have taken place. We already have the recordings up. We're hoping to get as many of those up as possible. So if you miss things and you're interested, we have a whole list of recorded events that cover all kinds of great topics. So you can keep learning and keep discovering more ways to get involved. So thank you very much, Claudine. Thank you very much to this panel. And yeah.
All right, thank you so much, David. And I want to take this time to thank our audience for making time to hear about just the amazing work that our city of San Jose, Santa Clara County, all of our nonprofit housing providers are doing as we all work together towards ending homelessness in Silicon Valley. As I stated earlier, homelessness, it can't be solved by one entity, right? It requires all of us and a commitment from the entire community. So a special thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for your expertise, sharing your hearts, the same hearts that you put and pour into your work every day. We're grateful for all of you championing this work that is so critical. So have a great night, everyone. And thank you again for joining us. Bye. Have a good night.